the healing dog, and the adaptable horse, symbols of trust, loyalty, and transformation. Throughout human history, animals have played an essential role not only in our survival, but also in our understanding of the inner workings of the psyche. They embody archetypal energies and instincts that resonate deeply within our unconscious, offering both guidance and warnings. Among these animals, the dog and the horse stand out as powerful symbols that connect us to the themes of healing, loyalty, adaptability, and transformation. The dog, a healer and loyal companion. The dog's association with healing is ancient and profound. In ancient Greece, dogs were not simply household pets or guardians. They held a sacred position within the healing temples dedicated to Asclepius, the god of medicine and rejuvenation. These temples were places where the sick sought cures through rituals and dreams, often experiencing what were known as theophanies, divine manifestations in which Asclepius appeared to them either as a human healer applying ointments or, intriguingly, as animals such as dogs or snakes. The significance of dogs in these healing sanctuaries is richly documented in the Epidaurian miracle inscriptions, which recount miraculous cures attributed to temple dogs. One inscription describes how a blind child's sight was restored by the gentle licking of a sacred dog, while another credits a dog with healing a child's head tumor. Such accounts elevate dogs beyond mere symbols to active participants in sacred healing processes. Psychologically, the dog symbolizes the part of ourselves that is open to receiving healing and transformation. However, this is not always easy. Just as one might hesitate or feel vulnerable when submitting to the humble act of being licked by a dog, healing often requires a profound humility and surrender. This metaphor extends to our inner world. To heal wounds, whether physical or emotional, we must soften our defenses and allow the instinctual, loyal aspects of ourselves to care for our pain. Dogs also represent loyalty, protection, and the faithful bond between humans and the instinctual world. Their sensitivity to human emotions is extraordinary. They can sense anxiety, provide comfort, and sometimes guide us through difficult times. This deep connection is mirrored in countless stories and myths where dogs serve as guardians of sacred thresholds or companions to heroes on quests. The horse, energy, flight, and the bridge between wildness and civilization. The horse is a symbol layered with complex meaning. Beyond its obvious association with energy and strength, captured in phrases like horsepower and workhorse, the horse's deeper symbolism lies in its instinctual nature and remarkable adaptability. Originally a wild creature, the horse's primary response to danger is flight. This instinctual urge to run away from anything frightening or uncanny marks it as a creature of swift reaction and survival. Yet, over thousands of years of domestication, horses have learned to overcome this instinct, transforming into reliable partners who stand steadfast in the chaos of battlefields, farms, and daily human life. This transformation highlights the horse's role as a bridge between wild instinct and controlled energy. The horse's obedience and service have made it one of humanity's most enduring animal allies. Expressions such as, "he works like a horse," or "she is a workhorse," celebrate its tireless effort and reliability. However, this partnership has come at a cost. Millions of horses have suffered and died through wars, hard labor, and harsh conditions. The psychological symbolism of the horse extends to the relationship between our instincts and conscious control. In myth, Plato famously described the soul as a charioteer controlling two horses, the white horse representing reason and obedience, the black horse representing appetite and wildness. The struggle between these forces reflects our inner tensions between discipline and desire, control and freedom. Moreover, horses are exquisitely sensitive to human emotions, often mirroring the feelings of their riders or handlers. This sensitivity offers a profound metaphor for our own capacity to tune into instinctual energies and the importance of emotional harmony. Tales, such as Alfred Cubin's depiction of a mad horse trapped in a labyrinth, illustrate the dangers of disconnecting from these instinctual forces. When cut off, they can become wild, frenzied, and destructive within our unconscious. The horse, as a symbol of the self, also appears in fairy tales like The Magic Horse, where it plays a crucial role in the process of individuation, the psychological journey toward wholeness. In this tale, the horse's death and subsequent transformation into a mandala kingdom symbolize the profound psychological alchemy that leads to the integration of disparate parts of the psyche. The healing power of the dog in ancient culture and psychology. The reverence for dogs as healing agents in ancient cultures was no mere coincidence. Their presence in sacred healing spaces symbolized a bridging of the physical and spiritual worlds. The sanctuary of Asclepius at Epidaurus was one of the most renowned healing temples in ancient Greece, drawing the sick from far and wide. Patients would often sleep within the temple precincts in a ritual called incubation, hoping to receive divine messages or healing through dreams. Reports from the Epidaurian miracle inscriptions reveal a profound belief in the dog's role as an intermediary between the divine and the mortal. The dog in these stories was not just a passive observer, but an active healer. The act of licking wounds or tumors symbolized a purifying and restorative force, akin to a sacrament. In many ways, this illustrates a psychological truth. Healing comes through acceptance and openness to the instinctual, animalistic parts of ourselves that we might otherwise dismiss or fear. From a Jungian perspective, the dog embodies the archetype of the faithful companion and protector, representing qualities of loyalty, trust, and unconditional love. Yet healing requires more than just the presence of these qualities. It demands a surrender to vulnerability. The image of being licked by a dog evokes a sense of humility and openness, essential for the deep healing of wounds, especially those within the psyche. Dogs also serve as mirrors of our emotional states. Their ability to sense and respond to human feelings speaks to an intimate link between our conscious selves and instinctual drives. In modern therapeutic settings, animals such as dogs are increasingly recognized as facilitators of emotional healing, particularly in trauma recovery and emotional support. The psychological symbolism of the dog also invites reflection on our relationship with loyalty and dependence. While dogs exemplify faithfulness and companionship, they also remind us of the balance between dependence and autonomy. Trusting an animal or our instincts means navigating this delicate balance, leaning on the familiar without losing sight of our individuality. The horse, between wildness and civilization. Turning from the dog to the horse, we encounter a symbol of both raw energy and disciplined cooperation. Horses, with their speed and strength, have been indispensable to human development, serving as beasts of burden, instruments of war, and partners in exploration. But beyond their practical uses, horses symbolize the tension between wildness and domestication, the constant interplay between instinct and control. The horse's natural flight response is a vivid metaphor for the human instinct to avoid danger, uncertainty, and the unknown. Yet, through domestication, the horse learns to trust humans and suppress this flight reflex, demonstrating adaptability and transformation. This process mirrors the psychological journey of integrating primal instincts within the framework of conscious life. The story of Chifley's Ride, where horses demonstrate remarkable intelligence and calm in life-threatening situations, illustrates the depth of this bond. The horse that slips but remains still to allow rescue embodies the qualities of trust and cooperation forged through long companionship with humans. Such stories highlight the profound emotional and instinctual communication possible between species and symbolically within ourselves. In myth and literature, the horse often represents the vital life force, or libido, but not simply as raw power. It is power that can be harnessed and directed. The white and black horses of Plato's chariot allegory illustrate the struggle between reason and desire, an eternal internal conflict that shapes our decisions and behaviors. This duality is central to the human experience, mastering the wild impulses without crushing them, integrating passion with purpose. The fairy tale of the magic horse, as retold by Hannah, takes this symbolic meaning further into the realm of psychological transformation. The horse becomes a vessel for the self, the totality of the psyche, through which the process of individuation unfolds. The princess's courageous act of killing the horse and transforming its body into a mandala symbolizes the sacrifice and renewal essential to personal growth. This story beautifully captures the paradox of growth. Sometimes, parts of ourselves must die or be transformed for the whole to emerge renewed and more integrated. The horse as a symbol of work, sacrifice, and sensitivity. Beyond its mythological and psychological significance, the horse's role as an obedient worker and sacrificial victim also resonates deeply. Millions of horses throughout history have endured harsh treatment and death, underscoring themes of sacrifice and endurance. This sacrificial aspect invites reflection on how power and vulnerability coexist. The phrase workhorse may seem utilitarian, but it also honors the horse's steadfastness and resilience. Psychologically, it reminds us of the value of endurance and loyalty, as well as the danger of burnout when instincts are ignored or exploited. The horse's acute sensitivity to human emotion also symbolizes an ideal state of emotional attunement. Horses can pick up on subtle cues and shifts in mood, and in turn, influence human feelings. This mutual influence reflects the dynamic interplay between our rational mind and instinctual body. Learning to listen to these nonverbal signals can deepen self-awareness and emotional intelligence. From loyalty to wildness, the danger of disconnection. However, the horse's symbolism is not solely positive. When cut off from conscious awareness, its instinctual energy can become chaotic and destructive. Alfred Kubin's haunting depiction of a starving, mad horse trapped in underground catacombs powerfully illustrates the psychological risk of repressing or ignoring our instinctual nature. Trapped within the labyrinth of the unconscious, the wild horse represents a part of ourselves that is desperate for release but unable to find safe expression. This image warns of the consequences of disconnecting from our vital instincts. Rather than a calm, obedient companion, the horse becomes a feral force of panic and destruction. Such disconnection often manifests in anxiety, neurosis, and emotional turmoil. The journey to psychological wholeness requires reintegration of these instinctual energies, transforming panic into power and wildness into creative freedom. Summary and transition. Together, the dog and the horse represent foundational aspects of the human psyche: loyalty, healing, instinctual energy, and adaptability. The dog invites us to embrace humility and trust in the process of healing, while the horse challenges us to master and integrate our raw vitality with conscious purpose. In the following sections, we will explore other powerful animal archetypes, such as the bull, the cow, the lion, and the serpent, that further illuminate the complex dance between our instinctual heritage and spiritual growth. Each animal opens a new window into the unconscious, revealing ancient wisdom that continues to guide us on the path toward individuation and self-realization. The bull, the cow, and the ox, pillars of civilization and symbols of sacrifice. Among the earliest domesticated animals, the bull and cow stand as monumental symbols of human culture, deeply intertwined with the rise of agriculture, social structure, and spirituality. Unlike the horse or dog, whose symbolism often centers on personal transformation and instinctual connection, the bull and cow represent the very foundations upon which civilizations were built. The domestication of cattle marked a turning point in human history, from nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyles towards settled farming societies. This transition brought about profound changes, enabling stable food supplies, population growth, and the development of complex social hierarchies. In ancient Egypt, the bull was revered as a sacred emblem of male generative power and vitality. The Apis bull, a living incarnation of the god Ptah, embodied fertility, strength, and creative force. This veneration is reflected in rituals and mythologies that celebrated the bull as a divine being, whose presence assured the continuation of life and prosperity. The motif of bull sacrifice, widespread across diverse cultures and epochs, speaks to a deep archetypal theme: the transformative power of sacrifice. In Mithraism, a mystery religion of the Roman Empire, the ritual killing of the bull, the tauroctony, was a sacred act symbolizing cosmic renewal. The bull's death was not an end, but a beginning. From its body sprang the herbs and grains that sustained human life. From its blood, the vine that produced sacred wine. This sacrificial motif is rich with psychological meaning. The bull's life-giving death reflects the paradox of transformation, destruction that precedes creation. At a personal level, this echoes the necessary sacrifices we make in the journey of individuation, letting go of old patterns, identities, or attachments to allow new growth. It also calls attention to the tensions inherent in the human condition, between life's bounty and inevitable loss. The cow, in contrast to the bull, symbolizes nurturing, motherhood, and the sustaining aspects of life. Associated with goddesses like Hathor and Nut in Egyptian mythology, and revered as Kamadhenu in Indian tradition, the cow embodies the archetype of the divine mother. Its gentle nature, provision of milk, and protective instincts towards its young mirror the feminine qualities of care, abundance, and unconditional love. Psychologically, the cow's symbolism points to the importance of receptivity, patience, and the sustaining forces that nurture growth over time. The cow's maternal devotion, its concern for the weak and young, highlights an aspect of the feminine psyche deeply connected to preservation and future potential. However, the cow also represents profound acceptance and resignation. Despite its nurturing role, the cow's fate often involves sacrifice at human convenience. This acceptance of fate symbolizes a quiet strength, a force like water that yields yet ultimately shapes the landscape. It teaches a lesson in humility and endurance, revealing the power found in surrender rather than resistance. The ox, often seen as a symbol of labor and patience, stands for the endurance and perseverance needed to sustain societies. The image of the ox pulling the plough evokes the virtues of hard work, steadfastness, and the silent strength that underpins progress. Together, the bull, cow, and ox encompass a spectrum of meanings that resonate both culturally and psychologically. Power and sacrifice, nurturance and endurance. Integrating domesticated instincts. Responsibility and balance. All these domesticated animals, dogs, horses, bulls, and cows, reflect aspects of the instinctual self that humans have learned to manage, nurture, and integrate. Their domestication parallels the psychological process of bringing wild, untamed instincts under conscious control, allowing us to harness their power without being overwhelmed. They also symbolize responsibility. To care for domesticated animals is to acknowledge our role in managing natural forces. Psychologically, this translates to our duty to respect and work with our own instincts rather than suppress or deny them. Dreams involving domesticated animals often signal areas where we hold responsibility for our impulses and emotional life. These animals serve as guides, pointing to the need for care, discipline, and respect for the instinctual energies within us. By contrast, encountering wild animals in dreams can indicate parts of ourselves that remain untamed or repressed, aspects for which we are not yet ready to take responsibility. This distinction between domestic and wild underscores a crucial psychological insight. Growth involves both integration and differentiation, accepting our instincts while discerning when to let them run free. The lion and the serpent, power, paradox, and the dance of light and shadow. The lion, majesty, power, and the royal archetype. Among wild animals, the lion has long stood as a potent symbol of strength, courage, and sovereignty. Known as the king of beasts, the lion's imposing presence and fearsome roar have inspired awe and reverence across cultures and epochs. Yet beneath this common cultural projection lies a more complex and nuanced archetype, one that reflects both the grandeur and the contradictions of power itself. The lion's association with the sun, especially in the zodiac sign Leo, situates it at the height of the year's warmth and vitality. The sun god's blazing power, manifesting through the lion, suggests an archetype of illumination, authority, and life-giving energy. However, the lion in the wild is not the unchallenged monarch we often imagine. Its dependence on lionesses for hunting and cub rearing, as well as its tendency to rest and conserve energy for long periods, complicate the picture of relentless power. This paradoxical nature of the lion, as majestic yet dependent, fierce yet sometimes lethargic, mirrors the dualities in human experience and the unconscious psyche. It invites reflection on the nature of power. It is not merely raw strength, but includes wisdom, cooperation, and responsibility. Historically, the lion's image was embraced by rulers and warriors to convey legitimacy and divine sanction. Babylonian and Assyrian kings identified themselves as lion killers, symbolizing their dominance over primal chaos and the untamed forces of nature. The lion's skin worn by Hercules in Greek myth signifies victory over the monstrous and untamed aspects of the self. The medieval heraldry that often featured lions reinforced the idea of nobility, courage, and protection. In religious texts, the lion's symbolism takes on a spiritual dimension. Jacob's blessing in Genesis, likening Judah to a lion, connects the tribe's strength and leadership to the lion's archetypal force. In Christian symbolism, Christ, as the Lion of Judah, epitomizes righteous power, sacrificial leadership, and victorious resurrection. Beyond physical and political power, lions also play a protective role, acting as guardians and warders. The stone lions guarding the Forbidden City in China and the Lion Gate at Mycenae are archetypal threshold guardians, figures that stand at the border between safety and danger, the known and the unknown. These guardians represent the psychic function of protecting the sacred, setting boundaries, and challenging those who would enter without readiness. The psychological significance of the lion is vividly illustrated in myths such as the fairy tale, the king's son who knew no fear. The sleeping animals guarding the Garden of Life's tree awaken as allies rather than foes, symbolizing the transformation from fear and opposition to alliance and integration. The hero's gaining of the apple and ring, symbols of self-realization and power, allows him to pass through the lion's gate from within, suggesting the necessity of internal mastery rather than external conquest. Carl Jung highlighted the danger of panic when confronting the unconscious, and the lion archetype embodies this threshold challenge. The archetype of the hero without fear must be embraced to navigate these depths successfully. The lion, then, is both adversary and ally, representing the potent emotional energies and instincts that must be integrated for individuation. The serpent, the paradox of evil and wisdom. If the lion is the king of beasts, the serpent is the archetypal enigma, complex, paradoxical, and profoundly ambivalent. The serpent's rich symbolic tapestry spans ancient mythologies, religions, and psychological theory, making it one of the most enduring and multifaceted symbols in human culture. One of the serpent's most famous attributes is its ability to shed its skin, symbolizing transformation, renewal, and the cyclical nature of life. This capacity for regeneration links the serpent to the eternal rhythms of death and rebirth, the Ouroboros of alchemical tradition being the quintessential image of this endless cycle. In many cultures, the serpent simultaneously embodies danger and healing, evil and wisdom. In ancient Greece, the snake was sacred to Asclepius, the god of healing, and his temples featured serpents as living symbols of the divine healing power. The serpent's dual nature is evident in biblical narratives as well. The serpent deceives Adam and Eve, precipitating the fall. Yet Christ likens himself to the brazen serpent lifted by Moses, symbolizing salvation and healing. Jung's exploration of the serpent archetype emphasizes its connection to unconscious forces, often primal fears or repressed instincts that can manifest as psychological poisons, but also contain latent healing power when acknowledged and integrated. The serpent's hypnotic gaze and venomous bite represent the dangerous allure of the unconscious, where confronting the shadow self is both threatening and necessary for transformation. The serpent's prominence in myths, such as the Babylonian Tiamat, Norse Jörmungandr encircling the world, and the Chinese dragon illustrates its universality and cultural adaptability. In contrast to Western demonization of serpents, the Chinese dragon embodies benevolence, wisdom, and cosmic harmony, highlighting cultural perspectives on balance and the integration of opposites. The serpent also symbolizes the Kundalini energy in Hinduism, the dormant spiritual power coiled at the base of the spine, whose awakening leads to enlightenment. This association links the serpent to secret knowledge, spiritual awakening, and inner revelation, gnosis. Gnostic traditions often invert the serpent's typical negative connotations, viewing it as a symbol of Christ or divine wisdom, offering illumination and liberation from material ignorance. This reinterpretation challenges orthodox narratives and invites reflection on the complexities of good and evil. The silent language of seduction power rarely announces itself with a roar. Sometimes it slithers in, coiled in silence. Annette understood this deeply. While the villagers reduced her presence to whispers and sighs, what they failed to see was the pattern she had mastered. She was not just moving through the world, she was reading it. Like a serpent sensing vibrations beneath the soil, she had developed an intuitive feel for where to strike, when to recoil, and how to hypnotize her prey with stillness rather than force. Unlike the lion's overt dominance, the snake operates in symbols, in emotional nuance, in psychological tension. And it was precisely this mode of power, elusive, enigmatic, that Annette had embodied. She didn't need to demand attention, it was drawn to her like moths to flame. But the serpent has two faces, wisdom and destruction. Serpent mythologies, between divine and forbidden. Across cultures, the serpent has always been an ambiguous symbol. In ancient Egypt, the cobra was worn on the crown of pharaohs, a sign of divine protection and lethal precision. In the Aztec tradition, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, was both a creator and destroyer. And, in the Judeo-Christian mythos, the snake is the great deceiver, the one who speaks truth, laced with temptation, seducing humanity into consciousness and consequence. Annette had stepped into this archetype unconsciously. She was no longer just a woman. She was becoming a force, part oracle, part outlaw. And like all serpent figures in mythology, her presence began to threaten the structure of the known order. The male gaze and the fear of the uncontrollable. Beneath the lust and obsession she inspired in the men of Akor, there was something else, something they could barely admit, even to themselves. Fear. She was not docile. She did not crave validation. She did not serve anyone's legacy, but her own. She reminded them of something ancient and primal, something that could not be tamed or bought. And so, their desire was always laced with anxiety. They loved her, yes, but more deeply they wanted to contain her, to win her, to control what they could not fully understand. She is chaos in heels, one man said. Beautiful, but dangerous. They weren't wrong. Annette wasn't playing a role. She was the role. Not because she had read it in a book or learned it from someone else, but because it had risen from within her, from her wounds, her refusals, and her silent vows to never be caged. Bolded section, 200 words, the Eve complex, when desire meets control. When Annette walked through the village square, time slowed. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Eyes followed her, not just because of her beauty, but because of what she represented. A woman who had chosen herself. In a world that demanded women serve, submit, and smile, she was a disruption. Her hips didn't sway to attract, but to claim. Her gaze didn't beg, it challenged. This was not seduction, it was sovereignty. And this is what the men hated the most. Not her allure, but her autonomy. The same narrative echoed through history. The Eve complex. The moment a woman reaches for the forbidden fruit, not out of ignorance, but out of knowing, she becomes dangerous. And when she dares to enjoy that fruit without remorse, she becomes unbearable. Annette was not punished for being desired. She was punished for enjoying being desired without shame. For the serpent is not evil. It is knowledge. And knowledge, in the wrong body, is always a threat. Power's price tag. But every archetype carries its shadow. What Annette hadn't fully grasped, yet, was that in wielding the serpent's power, you also invite its venom. To be the one who cannot be owned is also to be the one who cannot truly belong. She had turned her body into currency, her reputation into armor. But no armor is weightless, and every transaction, though voluntary, left her a little more hollow. The nights grew longer, the faces of her visitors blurred. Sometimes, when she lay alone, the echoes of footsteps haunted her more than the silence. There was wealth, yes. Influence, certainly. But connection, only shadows. Foreshadowing. Chief Undu, the ultimate temptation. When the whispers of Chief Undu's arrival reached her ears, something stirred, not in her body, but in her psyche. This wasn't just another conquest. This was a test. Undu was not like the others. He was myth in motion, a man of unimaginable resources and quiet danger. He didn't chase, he chose, and Annette knew. This encounter would be different. Not because she couldn't win, but because this time the cost of winning might be too high. Snake eating its tail. The Ouroboros symbol. In dreams, the serpent sometimes appears as an Ouroboros, a snake devouring its own tail. It is a symbol of cycles, of death and rebirth, of power feeding upon itself. Annette was approaching this moment. Her tactics had brought her to the edge of everything she had wanted. But now, the same tools might turn inward. Was she still in control? Or had the roles she played begun to consume the woman she was? The mirror and the fire. When the lion faces the serpent. Prologue. The eve of power's collapse. Annette stood before the mirror, not just the one made of glass, but the one made of time, memory, reputation, choice. The woman staring back was not the same girl who once giggled at the village's judgment, nor the same temptress who moved men like puppets. Something had cracked. It wasn't shame, it wasn't regret. It was a kind of stillness that comes when the hunt is over, and you realize the jungle is now inside you. Undu's arrival. A game. Neither could control Chief Undu's visit, didn't unfold as expected. He was charming, but distant, generous, but cold. He did not fall like the others. He watched, he measured. And when Annette performed the dance, voice velvet, eyes aflame, he didn't take the bait. Instead, he said, "Do you even know who you are without the mask?" It wasn't a rejection. It was an invitation, one she wasn't ready for. And yet, she couldn't walk away. The inner collapse. What followed was not love. Not war, but something more terrifying. Silence. Undu refused to pursue her, and she, for the first time, found herself unsure of how to respond. All the tools she had sharpened over years, beauty, mystery, boldness, suddenly felt dull. She realized she had learned how to seduce everyone but herself. Her power had always been outward, but Undu, in refusing to be conquered, forced her gaze inward, and what she saw frightened her. Bolded key section, 200 words. Shadow integration, the collapse of persona. There's a moment in every life when the mask fuses to the face, so long worn, it forgets it is not skin. For Annette, that moment came in a dream. She stood on a cliff, dressed in gold. At her feet, a serpent and a lion circled each other, not as enemies but as twins. One hissed, one roared, and then they turned to her, speaking not in words, but in reflection. "You are not us," they said. "You are the one who held us apart." She awoke, drenched in sweat, the room spinning. It wasn't lust or love she had mastered. It was division. She'd carved her identity around keeping desire and vulnerability at war, around keeping her fire away from her roots. But integration was not seduction. It was surrender. And surrender, to her, had always felt like defeat. The final confrontation. Becoming whole. The next time she met Undu, she didn't wear perfume. She didn't rehearse her lines. She simply sat across from him and said, "I don't know what I'm doing anymore." Undu smiled, not with victory, but with recognition. "I never wanted you to impress me," he said, "only to be real." They didn't sleep together. They didn't trade power. They talked until morning. And for the first time, Annette didn't feel like she was losing. She felt like she was arriving. Psychological framing, what had actually changed. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Annette's power had always come from an unconscious archetype. The serpent, the seductress, the rebel. She had weaponized what made her feared. But in doing so, she had also remained trapped in its cycle. The breakthrough was not in giving up the snake or lion. It was in realizing she was both. Power is not in playing a role. It's in transcending it. A new kind of silence. Annette left the corps soon after, not because she was ashamed, but because she was complete. She no longer needed the village's gaze to feel seen. She no longer needed men's obsession to feel valuable. She had stopped performing, and in that pause, she had finally heard her own voice. It was softer than she expected, but steady, clear. Final reflection. The lion, the serpent, and the self. In myth, the lion roars to claim territory. The serpent coils to protect secrets. But when the lion learns to listen and the serpent learns to rise, they stop fighting. They become one body, a force both powerful and wise. That's what Annette had become. Not an object of desire, not a legend, but a mirror for those ready to meet themselves